That Bothy's nothing but a pile of loose rocks. No mortar, no heat. You'll freeze inside before the first real storm.
Then bet against me, Malcolm. I'll winter there for 90 days, and not a morning will I wake up cold.
30 pounds says you won't last a month. I'll have the coin ready when you come crawling back.
Make it 60 for the full 90 days, and when spring comes, you'll hand it over.
The wager was struck. The valley folk whispered among themselves, half amused, half certain they'd seen a dead man walking.
They've never spent a winter on the hill. The Bothy stood for generations.
He loaded the last peat blocks, his collie watching the snow. Outside, Scott pulled his collar tight. The Bothy was a dark speck on the white hill.
He'll be back before the week's out, half frozen and begging for a fire.
With the wager ringing in his ears, Scott set his face to the storm and did not look back. The Bothy sat hunched against the hill, dry stone walls weathered but standing. Scott set down his load and ran a hand over the cold stone.
No mortar, but the old ones knew. Every crack, every gap, the wind will search, and I can't give it a single opening.
He dug into the cart for moss and earth, then worked his way around the inside, pressing the mix into every crevice. He climbed onto a stool and pressed turf into a gap above the lintel. Packing it tight, he struck a spark into the peat, and the small flame licked upward, casting shadows on the stone.
The valley's probably raising a glass to my freezing by now. They'll be counting the days.
He lifted the heavy wooden bar and dropped it into the brackets, sealing the Bothy shut. Beyond the walls, the first gust moaned across the hill. Snow began to tap against the small window.
Let it blow. The Bothy's been here 100 winters. This one won't be the last.
The door shook in its frame. The test had begun. Within the hour, the blizzard swallowed the hill. Wind screamed across the roof, but inside the air was still. The peat fire glowed steady, warming the stone floor. The collie slept, nose tucked under its tail.
The howl out there is a living thing, but the stone's holding. Father was right about the old ways.
Snow piled against the door, sealing the cracks further. The Bothy grew silent as the drift rose. The storm raged through the night, but the narrow room never lost its heat.
He'll be shivering in the dark by now, wishing he'd never made that fool bet. That pile of rocks won't hold the cold. I'd give him 3 days before he digs himself out.
The other men in the pub nodded, but no one offered to check.
60 pounds, easy money. The hill will teach him what mortar means.
Dawn broke over a buried Bothy. A thin ribbon of smoke still curled from the chimney, defying the morning frost. Scott added a block of peat to the embers and watched the flame catch. The collie lifted its head, then settled again. He moved his palm slowly over the inner stone, searching for any whisper of cold air. There was none.
Father showed me once 2 stone skins with earth packed between, a wall that breathed but never leaked. Men in the valley see loose rocks. They don't see a system older than their grandfathers.
Through the small window, the light was pale and muffled. The snow had climbed as high as the lintel. He didn't try the door. The drift would be solid as concrete on the other side.
60 days of fuel, if I am careful. Enough oatcakes and dried mutton. The dog will share. It's a long road, but the Bothy was built for this. I just have to keep the fire fed and the cracks filled.
He rested his palm against the warm stone and felt the slow, held heat of 100 winters. The siege had truly begun, and Scott was not leaving until spring proved him right. On the 4th day, the collie stirred from the fire, ears up, whining at a spot low on the wall.
What's got into you? There's nothing moving out there.
He knelt and held his palm near the stone. A hair-thin blade of cold slipped through a crack almost invisible.
A hairline fissure. The frost must have worked it open. If I don't seal it, the heat will leak.
He dug moss from the wall seal and pressed it deep with frozen dirt, working until the draft died.
That's how it is. The Bothy doesn't protect me. I protect the Bothy, one crack at a time.
He counted the remaining peat blocks, the oatcakes, the dried mutton. 12 weeks of food if he was careful.
Half the peat gone already. I'll have to burn less. Maybe let the cold creep closer.
The dog pressed its nose against the frozen door, then looked back at Scott with a low whine. Scott pulled the blanket tighter. The Bothy was solid, but the loneliness was a different kind of cold. His fingers brushed rough stone and found a groove not made by weather. Letters cut deep. DM 1846.
Someone else wintered here. Kept the fire alive, sealed the cracks, felt this same cold stone beneath his hand.
An old shepherd who left nothing but his mark on the wall, and a Bothy that remembered.
Malcolm and his wager. They think they're betting against me. They're betting against a century of men who built this place.
He'll be crawling back any day now. No mortar means no heat. I should have bet 100. Easy money.
But the pub was quiet. No one had seen Scott's smoke fail.
Let them doubt. The Bothy doesn't need their belief. It only needs my hands.
He traced the weathered digits again, then turned back to the fire. The stone had held its promise for 80 years. It would hold for 90 days, and the silence of the hill settled over him, heavier than the snow. A cold drop struck the back of his neck. He tilted his head. A dark stain spread near the chimney, water finding its way through the stone.
The heat melts the snow on the roof. Water finds every gap if I let it. I should have checked the chimney seal weeks ago.
He pulled a chunk of dried turf from the stack, then climbed back onto the stool and forced it into the crack.
Press it tight. No water, no ice. The old ones used turf for a reason.
He dropped back to the floor and counted the peat blocks. Less than half remained.
2 blocks a day, no more. The dog can share my blanket. We'll keep the bite off, not the chill.
The collie pressed against his leg, its warmth a small mercy in the gathering cold.
The walls hold, but the air is sharper each day. Spring is still far off. We'll just have to bear it.
The turf patch held. No more drips, but his hands were stiff, and the cold bit deeper than before. The fire sank low, and Scott pulled the blanket over both himself and the dog, waiting for morning. The days blurred into a rhythm of darkness and low fire. Scott stopped counting hours and started counting breaths.
Another notch. 45 days. That's halfway. Halfway to spring, halfway to proving them wrong. I'll bet Malcolm's sitting in that pub, counting my money in his head. He has no idea the Bothy hasn't so much as shivered.
The collie nudged his hand, a gentle press of a cold nose against knuckles. Scott scratched behind its ear.
At least you are still here, old friend. You don't care about the bet, just the fire. The walls are cold to touch now, but the air still holds. Another 45 days. I can do that standing on my head.
But his voice cracked on the last word. The silence swallowed it. He let the fire die to embers, pulling his coat tight. The cold crept from the walls, but the draft never returned.
If the old man DM could do it in 1846, so can I. We're made of the same stone.
The dog pressed closer. In the dark, Scott stared at the faint red glow of the coals and waited. The wind dropped. For the first time in weeks, the Bothy stood in an absolute eerie silence.
Something's wrong. The hill never falls this quiet. The whole sky is holding its breath.
He hoisted the bar and scraped at the frozen drift with a broken shovel until pale light broke through the cracks. The door swung open, and the cold air struck him like a blade fresh off the whetstone.
Nothing moves. White as far as the eye can push. The valley might as well be the moon.
Then, a low rumble rolled across the white waste. Distant thunder. The collie whined and backed into the Bothy.
Scott knew that sound. A storm was gathering on the northern rim, bigger than any he had faced.
He wrestled the door shut, dropped the heavy bar and pressed his back hard against the frozen wood.
This one's got teeth. The Bothy will have to earn its name tonight.
Outside, the wind began its high scream. The walls braced, and the Bothy waited like it always had. The blizzard struck like a hammer. The Bothy groaned as if the hill itself was trying to stand up. Scott crouched by the hearth, feeding the precious peat, when a splinter of freezing air sliced across his neck.
Where is that coming from? There. A black crack. No thicker than a coin's edge, just above the hearthstone. The fire's heat must have dried the mud. Every second, that crack is bleeding warmth. If I don't close it, the Bothy will fail.
He dug into the wall seal for moss, but the collie beat him to it, trotting over with a mouthful of dry moss from the stack. Scott took the offering, mixed it with frozen mud scraped from the floor, and pressed the paste deep into the fissure with bleeding fingers. The wind screamed. His hands grew numb, but he worked the crack, packing, smoothing, packing again.
Hold, damn you. Just hold until morning.
The draft stopped. Scott slumped against the wall, his fingers raw and shaking, the peat fire the only warmth left in the world. Outside, the blizzard raged on, but inside the pocket of air was still again. The Bothy had held. For now, Scott ran his hand over the sealed crack and felt the compacted earth between the inner and outer stone. The doubters had never understood the double skin.
2 layers of stone packed with earth, like a lung that breathes heat back into the room. That's why it holds.
The storm's howl deepened, but Scott's mind was on the old shepherd DM, and the knowledge passed down. A sound cut through the wind. A thin, human cry. The dog's ears snapped forward.
Did I imagine that? Numb. There it is again. Faint, but it's a man's voice.
The collie whined and scratched at the door.
There's someone out there. If I open that door, the cold will flood in. But if I don't...
He pressed his ear to the frozen wood. Another cry, weaker this time.
I can't go out. The storm's too thick. I'd lose the Bothy's heat in the man. But if I wait...
The dog barked once. Scott stared at the barred door, the weight of the decision pressing like the snow outside. The wind screamed, but the cry came again, a ragged, desperate plea. Scott's hand moved to the bar, then stopped.
If I lift this bar, I let the cold eat the room. The fire might die. Me and the dog, we'd freeze before I found him.
He dropped his forehead against the frozen wood. The collie whined, scratching at the gap beneath the door.
I can't save a man if I am dead. The Bothy's my duty. The storm has to break first.
The cry came once more, a faint, fading sound carried off by the wind, and then gone. Silence filled the Bothy like a held breath. The dog settled, but its eyes stayed on the door.
Did he fall silent because he found shelter, or because the cold took him? I won't know until the storm lifts.
He turned back to the fire and fed it a half-block of peat, his hands shaking not from the cold.
What would DM have done? The old ones knew. You save the Bothy first, or no one survives the night.
But the silence that followed was heavier than any stone, and Scott did not sleep. The storm's howl dropped to a low moan, and the battering on the door faded. Pale light seeped through the frozen window. Scott lifted the bar and drove the shovel into the drift, widening the gap until he could squeeze through into the white world. A set of tracks led away from the Bothy, faint depressions already filling with wind-driven snow.
Someone was here. The tracks head down the slope, but they're already half obscured. He couldn't have gotten far.
He stumbled after them, the snow sucking at his legs, but the trail vanished at a bare patch of scree. He shouted into the wind. No answer. The hill swallowed his voice. The cold was already biting through his coat, and the Bothy's door stood open behind him.
I can't go any further. The risk is too high. He might have found shelter adrift, a rock. I have to believe that.
He turned back every step a weight, and ducked through the low door into the warmth of the bothy. He barred the door and let the fire's heat seep back into his bones, the dog pressing close as if to share the guilt. He fed a block of peat to the flames and stared into the glow, hoping the traveler had found his own pocket of still air. Days crept by without a sound from the hill. The collie grew thin, its ribs sharp under its coat.
It hasn't eaten in 2 days. I am down to my last oatcake. He needs it more than I do.
He broke the oatcake in half and pressed the smaller piece to the dog's mouth. It licked weakly.
That cry I heard, was it real? Or did the wind play tricks on a lonely man?
Another moan pierced the quiet, closer this time, near the window. The dog lifted its head.
He's still alive, and if I don't go now, he won't be. The dog won't make it without warmth either.
He lifted the collie gently closer to the hearth and piled the last blocks of peat beside it. He wrapped a torn blanket around his shoulders, took the lantern, and hefted the heavy bar.
Stay, boy. I'll be back. The Bothy will hold the heat long enough for one quick search.
He swung the door open into the frozen dark. The lantern's flame shuddered but did not die. The wind bit through his coat as he waded into the dark, lantern swinging. He shouted until his throat burned, a shape ahead, half swallowed by a drift. A man's hand reached out of the snow like a drowning plea.
Help, please, don't leave me.
He's alive. The Bothy's light is right there. If I can drag him, we both survive.
Scott threw the lantern aside, hooked his arms under the man's shoulders, and hauled him upright against his chest.
Move. Just 20 strides to the Bothy. Don't count. Just push.
The man's boots left furrows in the snow. Scott's legs burned with every step, the fallen lantern flickering behind. The orange glow of the Bothy window swelled, promising warmth and survival. He fixed his eyes on it.
Almost there. The dog's waiting. The fire's still burning. We can't stop now.
But the Bothy door still felt a mile away, and the man in his arms grew heavier with each passing second. He lunged through the low doorway, spilling Finn onto the stone floor. The warm air hit his face like a blessing. He crawled back, shoved the door shut, and dropped the bar. The wind's howl muffled. They were inside. The fire was dying. He tossed the last block of peat onto the embers and blew until the flames caught. He wrapped Finn in every blanket, then pulled him closer to the hearth. The dog lifted its head and whined softly.
His skin is ice. I need to get something warm inside him, or he won't last the hour.
He heated water in the tin cup, held Finn's head, and pressed the cup to his mouth. A thin trickle ran down his chin.
There we go. Take small sips. Don't choke. Just a little more.
The collie limped over and curled up beside Finn, pressing its thin body against his legs. Scott leaned against the cold stone, his body screaming for rest. The Bothy hummed with trapped heat, defying the storm again.
We're not out of the dark yet, but the Bothy's holding. And as long as it holds, we've got a chance.
Where am I? The light was all I could see.
A Bothy, you are safe now. Can you manage a sip of water?
I was walking from Glen Tilt. The storm came sideways. I lost the path, and my compass broke.
He'll need more food than I planned, but we'll cut the shares thinner. No one starves while the Bothy stands.
He broke his last oatcake into 3 pieces and handed one to Finn, then fed a crumb to the collie, which licked his fingers. The dog's tail gave a weak thump against the stone, a sign of life returning.
How does this place stay so warm? There's no stove, just these rocks. I've never felt anything like it.
2 stone skins, packed with earth. The old shepherds built it to breathe heat back into the room. It's held since 1846.
Outside, a soft dripping began. Water running off the eaves, the first whisper of the thaw.
The thaw's coming. A few more days of careful fire, and we'll dig out. Malcolm's 60 pounds will wait.
Morning light cut through the window, sharp and golden. The dripping grew louder, water running in rivulets down the stone. Scott and Finn dug the door free, heaving wet snow aside until the low opening gaped at a changed world.
The valley's green again. I'd lost track of the days, but it has to be near 90.
He turned to the Bothy and pressed his hand flat against the outer stone. The wall was still warm.
Gather your things, Finn. There's nothing left to burn, but we have enough strength to walk.
I owe you my life. If I hadn't seen that glow through the storm...
The Bothy saved you, not me. I just kept the fire and the cracks sealed.
The collie limped out into the sun, sniffing the wet grass. It looked back at the Bothy once, then wagged its tail.
We walked into this place when the snow was falling. We walk out with the thaw. The Bothy didn't just shelter us. It gave us back the spring.
The Bothy stood silent and dark behind them, its work done for another season. The path to the valley was soft with mud, but their steps were light. Word of their survival raced faster than they walked. Malcolm was in the inn when a boy shouted the news. He dropped his glass and ran out.
You are alive. The Bothy. It held. I owe you 60 pounds and an apology.
Keep the money, Malcolm. The Bothy didn't need you to believe.
Number. I lost the bet fair. Take it. Take it in front of everyone.
He counted out the coins and pressed them into Scott's hand. The wager was settled.
He saved my life, too. That Bothy's light was the only thing I could see in the storm.
The collie wagged its tail, and even Malcolm looked down at the thin dog with something like respect. The crowd that had bet against him now stared at Scott, as if seeing him for the first time.
It was never about the money. The Bothy just needed to stand.
Scott climbed the hill alone, the collie at his heels. The Bothy's door stood open, waiting. He ducked inside and ran his fingers over the old carving. DM 1846. The letters still held their edge.
Another winter passed. Another name. Someday a man will carve his own initials next to yours.
He pressed his palm against the sealed crack. The mud and moss paste had hardened into part of the wall.
I kept it shut. The Bothy did the rest.
He lifted the thin sack of his belongings and stepped through the low door for the last time that spring. He touched the wooden plaque someone had nailed beside the door long ago. Shepherd's Bothy, Estet, 1846.
Generations of shepherds. And now a traveler. This Bothy doesn't belong to me. I just borrowed it for a season.
He pulled the door shut but did not bar it. The Bothy would stand open for whoever needed it next. The dry stone Bothy sat quiet on the hill, ready for the next storm, the next shepherd, the next century. Spring spread across the highlands, and Scott walked the hill paths with the collie at his side, visiting the Bothy like an old friend. One morning, a young shepherd stood at the Bothy door, tracing the old red arrow with a calloused fingertip.
You want to learn the Bothy? Come inside. I'll show you the double skin and tell you about the shepherd who carved his name in 1846. The old knowledge doesn't live in books. It lives in hands and stone and peat smoke.
They spent the afternoon inspecting walls, touching cracks and mixing mud and moss. The collie lay in the doorway, tail thumping as the lesson went on. The young shepherd listened with fierce attention, knowing he was being handed something no one in the valley had written down.
This is how it survives. One winter, one shepherd, one season of mending.
As they left, the young shepherd looked back at the Bothy with new eyes, the red arrow, a promise he would one day carry. Scott whistled for the collie and walked down the hill, the Bothy's door left open, as always, for the next storm. For centuries, dry stone Bothys have dotted the Scottish Highlands, built without mortar, held by weight and craft. Shepherds wintered in them, sealing cracks with earth and moss, keeping the fire alive through the worst storms. The doubter sees loose rocks, The survivor sees a pocket of still air. Scott McLean proved what generations knew. The Bothy never once went cold. Its thick double skin trapped heat, and its walls shrugged off the wind that drove men to their knees. When Finn was lost on the hill, it was the Bothy's glow that saved his life, a beacon in the blizzard. The valley folk had bet against the stones, but the stones had outlasted their doubt. And now, a young shepherd carries the old knowledge, taught by the hands that sealed the cracks. The dry stone Bothy waits on the hill, door unbarred, ready for the next storm, the next century. It stands, as it always has, a loud silence against the wind.